Good morning and welcome to the Up the Grove Morning News. Today is Friday, March 14th. Please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance and remain standing for a moment of silence. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Please be seated. Since today is Pie Day, we have some pie related stuff for you today. We are going to look at the pie graph for the castles that were in the library. You can see with the largest piece, there's the most votes for castle number 2. For the next largest piece, the second largest, we had castle number 5. And the third castle with the most votes was tied between 23 and 17. So congratulations to all the first graders who made castles. They all were very nice, and you can take them home today. The other pie related thing we're doing is the book Enemy Pie. This is one of my favorite pie related books. It should have been the perfect summer. My dad helped me build a treehouse in our backyard. My sister was at camp for 3 whole weeks, and I was on the best baseball team in town. It should have been the perfect summer, but it wasn't. It was all good until Jeremy Ross moved in next door. I didn't like Jeremy Ross. He laughed at me when I struck out at the baseball game. He had a party on his trampoline and I wasn't invited, but my best friend Stanley was. Jeremy Ross was the one and only person on my enemy list. I never had an enemy list until he moved into the neighborhood, but as soon as he came along, I needed one. I hung it up in my treehouse where Jeremy Ross was not allowed. Dad understood stuff like enemies. He told me when he was my age, he had enemies too, but he knew a way to get rid of them. I asked him to tell me how. Tell you how? I'll show you how, he said. He pulled a really old recipe book off the shelf. Inside, there was a worn-out scrap of paper with faded writing. Dad held it up and squinted at it. Enemy pie, he said, satisfied. You may be wondering exactly what enemy pie is. I was wondering too. But Dad said the recipe was so secret he couldn't even tell me. I decided it must be magic. I begged him to tell me something, anything. I will tell you this, he said. Enemy pie is the fastest known way to get rid of enemies. Now, of course, this got my mind working. What kind of things, disgusting things, would I put in a pie for an enemy? I brought Dad some weeds from the garden. He shook his head. I brought him earthworms and rocks. He didn't think he needed those. I gave him the gum I'd been chewing all morning long, and he gave it right back to me. I went outside to play alone. I shot baskets until the ball got stuck on the roof. I threw a boomerang that never came back. And all the while, I listened to the sounds of my dad chopping, stirring, and blending the ingredients of enemy pie. This could be a great summer after all. Enemy pie was going to be awful. I tried to imagine how horrible the smell must be, or worse, what it must look like. But when I was in the backyard looking for ladybugs, I smelled something really, really, really good. As far as I could tell, it was coming from our kitchen. I was a bit confused. I went in to ask Dad what was wrong. Enemy pie shouldn't smell this good. But Dad was smart. If enemy pie smelled bad, your enemy would never eat it, he said. I could tell he'd made enemy pie before. The buzzer rang and Dad put on the oven mitts and pulled the pie out of the oven. It looked like plain old pie to me. It looked good enough to eat. I was catching on. But still, I wasn't sure how this enemy pie worked. What exactly did enemies do? Maybe they made their hair fall out. Maybe their breath stinky. Maybe it made bullies cry. I asked Dad, but he was no help. He wouldn't tell me a thing. But while the pie cooled, he filled me in on my job. He talked quietly. There's one part of enemy pie that I can't do. In order for it to work, you need to spend the day with your enemy. Even worse, you have to be nice to him. It's not easy, but that's the only way enemy pie can work. Are you sure you want to go through with this? Of course I was sure. It sounded horrible. It was scary. but it was worth a try. All I had to do was spend one day with Jeremy Ross. Then he'd be out of my hair for the rest of my life. I rode my bike to his house and knocked on the door. When Jeremy opened the door, he seemed surprised. He stood on the other side of the screen door and looked at me, waiting for me to say something. I was nervous. "Can you play?" I asked. He looked confused. "I'll go ask my mom," he said. He came back with his shoes in his hand. His mom walked around the corner to say hello. "You boys stay out of trouble," she said, smiling. We rode our bikes for a while and played on the trampoline. Then we made some water balloons and threw them at the neighbor girls, but we missed. Jeremy's mom made us lunch. After lunch, we went to my house. It was strange, but I was kind of having fun with my enemy. He almost seemed nice. But of course I couldn't tell Dad, since he'd worked so hard on the enemy pie. Jeremy Ross liked my basketball hoop. He said he wished he had a basketball hoop, but they didn't have room for one. I let him win a game, just to be nice. Jeremy Ross threw the boomerang. He threw it and it came right back to him. I threw it, went over the house and into the backyard. We climbed over the fence to find it. The first thing Jeremy noticed was my treehouse. My treehouse was my treehouse. I was the boss. If my sister wanted in, I didn't have to let her. If my dad wanted in, I didn't have to let him. And if Jeremy wanted in, "Can we go in?" he asked. I knew he was going to ask me that, but he was at the top of my enemy list, and enemies aren't allowed in my treehouse. But he did teach me how to throw a boomerang, and he did have me over for lunch, and he did let me play on his trampoline. He wasn't being a very good enemy. "Okay," I said, "but hold on." I climbed up ahead of him and tore the enemy list off the wall. I had a checkerboard and some cards in the treehouse, and we played games until my dad called us down for dinner. We pretended we didn't hear him, and then when he came out to get us, we hid from him. But somehow he found us. My dad made us macaroni and cheese for dinner, my favorite. It was Jeremy's favorite too. Maybe Jeremy Ross wasn't so bad after all. I was beginning to think that maybe we should just forget about enemy pie. But sure enough, after dinner, Dad brought the pie out. I watched as he cut it into 8 thick slices. "Dad," I said, "it sure is nice to have a new friend in the neighborhood." I was trying to get his attention, trying to tell him that Jeremy Ross was no longer my enemy. But Dad only smiled and nodded. He thought I was just pretending. Dad dished up 3 plates side by side with big pieces of pie and giant scoops of ice cream. He passed one to Jeremy. So here they are about to eat the pie. If you want to see what happens when you eat enemy pie, check the book out for yourself and find out. We're going to practice all of our habits. Are you ready? Do them with me. Habit 1, be proactive. I'm in charge of me. Habit 2, begin with the end in mind. Have a plan. Habit 3, put first things first. Work, then play. Habit 4, think, win-win, balance courage and consideration. Habit 5, seek first to understand, then to be understood. Listen first, then speak. Habit 6, synergize, work together. Habit 7, sharpen the saw. Habit 8, find your voice. Remember to follow your eagle expectations. Be responsible, be respectful, be safe, be prepared, and be present. That's our show for today. Teachers, please do your attendance before 9. Bye.